this Spinach TV episode, we're taking a little bit of a tangent away from something that's specifically business to something that affects a lot of business owners. And Michael Philpott has been super open about his journey with all things ADHD. And so I wanted to delve into that with you today. So thank you for being available to talk to me about such a personal topic.
My pleasure. Thank you. And yes, happy to be very open. So disclaimer right now, we're going to talk about some deep shit.
Yeah, let's do it. Well, I'm going to leave it nice and broad. Why don't we get started with your background and your journey with ADHD?
Cool. Okay. So ADHD, interesting. I didn't find out I had ADHD until my wife, my lovely wife, Estella, after many, many years, 10 years of being married, she started to notice this real decline in my warmth and closeness towards her. So it was really weird. I'd define it as like a jandal flip-flop, right? Like I would go from kind, considerate, caring, warm to absolute flip side of that, cold, detached. And I had this voice in my head that was just like, I hate you type of thing. It was really bad. And it started with a couple of hours, and then it would snap, and then it went for a day, and then it went for a few days, and then it became a few weeks. And my wife was like, there's something wrong with you. It's not me. It's not me. It's you. And I knew it as well. But the problem being is while I was in it, I couldn't stop it. It was like, why am I doing this? This is awful. I love this person. I love this person. Why am I doing this? But I couldn't stop. And so we went and saw my doctor. And, this is a family doctor I've known for years since I was a kid. She gave me my first stitches when I was like 8 years old or something. And I said to my doctor, my wife kind of explained what was going on. I explained what was going on. And I said to my doctor, look, here's the deal. What I probably really need, given my, drug history, I think I just need some legal microdosing. And she just pissed herself laughing. And she was like, I bet that you've got undiagnosed adult ADHD. I'm like, what a dick thing to say. Of course I don't. I don't have any of that stuff, Like, what does that even look and sound like? And she started just saying a few things, and my wife's like, oh yes, Now, of course, my wife and I established our business together, and Estella worked in the business with me for the first 5 years, so she knew exactly, like, yep, that, oh, that definitely. So basically from there, an appointment was made for me. Well, it wasn't made, actually, that's lies. We were given the option of going to through the normal channels, public, go and get an evaluation, but you're looking at 6 to 12 months minimum before you're going to get seen. And my wife is like, that's not going to happen. I want him seen in like a month at most. So she did what she does. She gets on the internet. She's like, and she found a psychologist. And next minute, we're having a meeting. And we're going through all of this stuff, and she's like, "Wow, okay, that's interesting." And there were two parts to it that were quite different, which was separating childhood trauma from innate ADHD, because childhood trauma can look, sound, feel like the byproducts that would be of ADHD. So we had to do a more intensive couple of sessions where she dug down into it, and they go through the actual proper testy thing where they ask my wife stuff, they ask my sister stuff, and then they do the evaluation, and it came out that I'm definitely 100% innate ADHD. So, and for me, I'm like, oh my God, that answers so many questions around why I left school when I was 14, why I struggled with so much, why I was so good at woodwork and engineering and anything that needed use my hands, but anything cognitive process, man, I sucked at that. I hated that stuff. So it made sense and there was relief, but then there was this period of like, but why did I suffer for
Mm,
40 something years? You know what I mean?
mm,
Because the suffering that people with ADHD go through is quite traumatic in itself. You know, that self-doubt about your ability is so ingrained that, you know, I would avoid situations where I had to do cognitive process because it was embarrassing. Um, and just, you know, reminded you of how crap you were at things that everyone else seemed to be perfectly good at.
mm,
So that's how the diagnosis came about. And from the diagnosis, it said, you know, like medication is recommended, da da da. So they tried me on. You can imagine my excitement. I was like, yes, medication, it's fantastic. And they sort of said, well, you know, Ritalin, and I'm like, I don't really feel like I want to go the Ritalin route, you know, straight away, um, because of my drug history. I don't want to go Ritalin. It just seems a little bit, you know, it took me a lot to stop using drugs. I don't know if I want to just go back there so easily. So we tried some non-addictive stuff, and we went through probably 2.5 years where we tried this, and you had to try it for long enough to go, you know, is that actually suited to you? You can't sort of just have it for a couple of days. You've got to take it for a month at least. And what I found with some of the medications were like, whoa, some of them were like, eh. But there was a degree of focus for all of
mm,
them. Um, and we ended up landing on a thing called Stratera, or I think that's how it's pronounced. And Stratera is non-addictive, um, and it worked for focus. And I was on that for a long time. But what was really weird is every morning I took it, I had to eat porridge because porridge is the only thing I can eat in the morning because I hate chewing. I find it so boring. Um, so I, you know, eat porridge every morning, take this pill, and if I didn't eat the porridge, I would get really, really bad heartburn, indigestion.
mm,
So we did that for a long time, and I had this really epic focus. But what was happening in the background is that I was dealing with some other stuff, right? Some
mm,
personal stuff, and then of course we had COVID, and we had all this uncertainty.
mm,
And to cope with that, I just started drinking, you know, two bottles two bottles of gin a week, sorry. And well, probably three, let's be honest. Probably about 3 bottles of gin a week. And I gradually increased in weight. So I ended up at 91 kgs,
mm,
which is obese for someone my height. And you know, I'd never been overweight in my life. Uh, so there was that, and then we went and saw my doctor, and by then I had a new doctor who was my doctor's daughter, which was kind of handy, and a family, you know, practice.
mm.
And she took my blood pressure and my heart rate, and she was like, "Yeah, you're gonna die. If you keep going, you are going to die soon." I was like, "Oh, okay." And my wife, she was just like, "Do you know what the problem is? The problem is he's got, you know, a dopamine deficiency in his brain. The medication that he's on is non-addictive. It gives him focus, but it's not giving him stimulant. He
Mm.
needs a stimulant, and he's not getting it, so he's using alcohol, and it's making him fat." You know what I mean? And it was like, she's good. My wife is good, you know. So the new doctor is like, cool. Well, what do you want? And of course, my wife's done research. There are five. There are five medications that he can use, and the one no one's ever spoken about is actually amphetamines.
Mm.
And my doctor was like, "Oh, easy, cool. We'll get them. Put them on it." The thing is, you're just going to have to do a urine sample once a month, you know, because of your previous drug history. And I was
Mm.
like, I know that. And at the start, I didn't want to go down that route because I didn't want to feel like a criminal, you know, who was like
Mm.
untrustworthy. I'd been off drugs for 12 years, you know, it's like
Mm.
I just didn't want to feel that way. Um, so took that in stride and just went, okay, cool. For what it's worth, I don't want to drink myself to death. I'll take the urine tests. And so I started taking this medication, which is, like I say, this one's called dexamphetamine. It's literally amphetamines, right? And I laughed to myself because I'm like, 3 years ago, I went into that doctor's office going, I just need to be legally microdosed. 3 years later, I'm legally microdosed. And what's happened is within the first, so I went back after a month of being on those pills, I went back, had my first urine sample, and that's just to show I'm taking the pills, right?
Mhm.
And then I had a blood test, and I hate having blood tests because my drug history is that I used to be a heroin addict for 10 years, and I used to inject myself with heroin. And then for 2 to 3 years after that, I injected myself with amphetamines. So when someone's trying to inject me and they can't do it well, I get a little bit annoyed. So anyway, I have these blood tests, and the second one comes back after a month of me being on the right medication, and she's like, "Oh my God, your blood, your liver function is back to normal. Your blood pressure is awesome, and whatever else the other one was." And I was like, "Ta-da!" Um, but I'd come from 91 kgs down to 86 kgs
Mhm.
within a month. And, like, not by accident, we walk every morning around Hagley Park, which is just over the road there. We have a 10 kg weight vest, 1 kg weight wrists. Like, we stay fit, but it wasn't enough because of how much I was drinking. So my weight is now, I just weighed myself yesterday for we had to do our specialty courses for diving, and I had to reweigh myself. I'm now 84 kgs. So my weight is coming down. I'm getting healthier, all because they put me on the right one.
You've alluded a couple of times to your past drug use.
Yeah.
So let's get the background on it so that some of the stuff makes sense.
Okay, cool. So at the age of, I was doing my outdoor recreation industry training, so wanting to become get into outdoor instructing and stuff like that, because I was so physical with the work I did always, since I left school. From freezing works, forestry, fishing boats, building, forestry, tree surgery. That was my gig, right? Like burning my body to make money, but it was also it helps me to. Turns out that it helped me to kind of deal with my ADHD.
Mhm.
Essentially exhausting myself every day so I could sleep at night, maybe. Um, I was at my absolute fittest while I was doing my outdoor training. I was the second fittest person in the out of the class. I didn't smoke. I didn't drink. I ran every single day. I trained in martial arts 5 days a week, Wing Chun and stick and knife fighting. And on Sundays, I used to don a backpack and run for the entire day. At that point, I met someone from one of my friend's brothers who was reminded me a lot of my youth growing up in Wanganui and of a lot of, my trauma from when I was young. And
Mm.
he introduced me to heroin. And I was pretty arrogant back then. I would have been 23 years old. So ironically, studies indicate that childhood trauma young people who have trauma will appear um, grown beyond their years, like mature beyond
Mm.
their years. They
Mm.
will be more resilient to some things and will appear very grown up. Until they hit 22 years old, their life will shit itself and fall apart, generally, is what happens. And right on point, that's exactly what happened to me. So 22. Um, by the time I hit 23 was just before the end of my outdoor training, and I met this guy, reminded me of all of my trauma from my past, and he introduced me to heroin. And like I say, I was arrogant. I was like, sure, it'll have no impact on me. I'm so fit, strong, healthy. And Sure enough, the first time they gave it to me, it didn't do anything. Second time, boom. And all of my childhood trauma, all of that rubbish I had in my head, for the first time ever, alcohol couldn't do it, nothing else could do it. But for the first time ever, my head just went, and just calmed down, and it just went quiet, and it was blissful. And this isn't an ad for heroin addiction, but it worked. It was the first thing that had really just stopped all the noise. And I could focus, like as in not super focus, like the ADHD was definitely still there and very active, but all of this background shit just went quiet. And what was interesting is up until that point, like I was definitely more reserved, held back with my mannerisms. I was very backward and coming forward. My communication style, part of my trauma, where my trauma came from, was in a foster home orphanage in the South Island, where I was there at the time when the people who ran it were prolific for abuse of children, and they ran it for 20 something years. So any of the staff that worked there while they were there were also abusive to children because it came from the top down. So I have a very vague recollection, but part of that process made me very, very quiet and very shy. So here I am, I'm at 23 years old, and I've just taken a substance that puts all of that to the background, and I can start to be a little bit more confident. And for 10 years, I used that to mask up all this other rubbish, right? And I achieved a lot of things during that time by being confident to be able to approach things and do stuff. Now, the downside to addiction, obviously, is that there are two lives that you have to live. One is the one where, because by that time I was a corporate, executive trainer, wearing a suit and a tie, and I was out there on stage. But then I was, on the other hand, active heroin addict. So what we call it is high functioning heroin addiction. You're to the outside world, you're normal. And to me, I had to take heroin every day to be normal so I could do what I did. And yeah, it was 10, 10 years, 9, 10 years of that until I went to, and the worst part being is I was self-aware, right? So high performing also means that you're self-aware. So you know exactly what you're doing wrong, what's going to happen, but you can't stop doing it because it's helping you to be where you are to do what you need to do today. So I started to try and deal with it a few different ways. One was Rivia, which is a pill that was made for alcoholism that coats the brain receptors so you can't feel the effects of injecting heroin. Problem being is you take the pills by choice, and the other problem is they're not subsidized outside of alcoholism. And I wasn't going to say I was an alcoholic because I wasn't, because I was an honest drug addict. Which terribly honest to a fault, actually. I lost quite a few jobs by being honest about my addiction, right? If people asked, it was like, yes, I have a drug addiction, yes. And they were like, well, we can't, So I ended up finding a guy, Dr. George O'Neill in Perth, who was doing subcutaneous Rivia implants into the skin, and they would be like under the layer of between the stomach and the fat, and they would slow release the chemical for 6 to 9 months. And that was fantastic. The first time I went over, he said to me, if you can get from where you are to Perth, I'll do it for free. And they were worth $10,000 each. And so I went over, did the first ones. For the first period, I was really good. Towards the end, I started getting a bit shaky. I definitely tested the theory. I could not get high off injecting drugs, heroin in particular. So it worked. But the only problem is when it works, you're now left with all of that rubbish that's been building up in the background, all the problems that not only your childhood trauma, but all of the problems that you've built through having to associate with buying and associating with that level of drug. So by the second time I went over and got them done, I was fine for a while, but I wanted to find something else, that stimulant that I was missing. So when people say to me, how did you actually get off heroin? The truth is I found methamphetamine. So I started injecting crack, essentially, methamphetamine. And what happened at that time was quite life-changing and transformative, is that the alcohol and heroin are both suppressants. They just, it's that suppress everything, make it go numb. So I'd been numbing myself from my rubbish for 10 years, and prior to that, I would have been drinking alcohol, but numbing myself from it all. But when I injected methamphetamine, all the lights in the building and the house came on. In my brain, all the circuits that were like dormant just went boom, and connected and started doing incredible stuff. If you've ever seen the movie Limitless, that's exactly what it felt like. And I just went crazy. I wanted to know the answers to important things. The most important one was like, what happened in my childhood? And, I started asking questions. I started talking to my parents. They didn't like that me. They preferred the me that didn't ask questions. And slowly over time, after studying everything, I just got to the point where the people I was visiting to purchase the drugs, all I could see was no longer human beings. I could see their childhood trauma from the research I'd been doing. And it was like, I just can't be anywhere near that anymore. The juice wasn't worth the squeeze. I didn't want the drug to come at such a cost of being around people, the people with so much trauma. So one day I just, right, that's it, I'm done. And, the storm blew itself out, so to speak. I was just done with it and I stopped. No horrible feelings, no, come downs or anything like that. It was just, I'm done with it. But now looking back on it, because then, my wife, later on, me changing so much, that was the indication that I'd pushed myself to a point without stimulant, because for 10 years we didn't drink, we didn't do, nothing, absolutely nothing. And at that point, that lack of stimulant started to come in, and that's full circle. It was ADHD all the time. Underneath all of that, it started with the trauma was what I was trying to suppress, but it was also the ADHD. So when people talk about ADHD, they talk about, there's this lack of focus, or which there's not. There's so much focus. It's just where you choose to put it. The behavioral problems and stuff like that. The real thing being is that if it's not dealt with, there will be a stimulant that is searched for in some way, shape, or form. And we talk about addiction, and my addiction was just one of the ones that's less accommodated for, right? Gambling, holy, now there's an addiction that'll ruin your life. But it's sociably acceptable, it's fine. Drinking alcohol, there's an addiction it's going to ruin your life, sociably acceptable, but fine. Working yourself to death, an addiction. Where you're searching for doing enough good in the world that you get that replacement of dopamine by people saying you've done a great job, except you don't believe them, so you keep doing it, These are all some of the really negative, unseen aspects of undiagnosed ADHD. And the worst part being is there's a school of thought, especially for my age, of a lot of the people I talk to who are like, well, not medication. I just don't want to be stereotyped in that way of like being on medication. And if I was on medication, I'd only want to be on it for a short while. This is for life. ADHD is not a curable disease. This is for life. So if anything, that I want to really share with people is that's how bad it can go, right? You can end up really bad. to the point where you would kill yourself. And the likelihood with ADHD is higher. There are higher probabilities of that through rejection, depression, all the types of things that come from feeling unworthy and a lack of capability to do what normal people can do. But once you get it sorted, then the world changes. Like, it totally changes. You can do incredible things with with an understanding of what's happening in your brain. But it just does this thing, which is it goes, you're actually okay. Like, there are a body of people out there very much like yourself, if you have ADHD or if you're neurodiverse in any type of way. And I think the best way that I've heard it said, there's two ways that I've heard it said that really hit home for me. One was in hunter-gatherer times, we were the people who are predisposed to be alert and on the lookout for safety. We keep the rest of the tribe safe and alive because we're the ones that are going, what was that? What was that? What was that? What was that? We're the ones that will jump up and run out into the darkness to find out what that was. But we just don't live in a society that requires that so much in a physical sense anymore. So it's channeling that into something that works for you. The other cool one, and this was related to children, but it works, so it's the same for adults. You have a race car brain, like other people have got a Toyota brain. You've got a race car Ferrari brain. That's amazing. Problem is you've got tricycle brakes. So your brain goes like this, but you just don't have strong enough brakes to control all of that power. You've got that processing power. So if you can work on strengthening your brakes, it'll work for you, which leads nicely into how do you do that, right? Yeah.
It does. How do you do that?
How do you do that? Okay, so it's a bit of a privileged position to be in. I would have to say, being open about it for a start is a really big help, right? If you're trying to hide this, then you're never going to feel right. We started off by putting a protective kind of layer around me that identifies that if I want to be focused, use that race car brain to do stuff, then if something comes in from the outside, I'll be like, that's interesting. I mean, this is important. I know that, but that's interesting. So I need to manage or have these things managed so that they don't interrupt. So the first thing was that I did as a business owner, I took my phone number off any findable space. You cannot find my phone number, hopefully. Let me know if anyone can. And that is because the worst enemy of me is this thing randomly ringing and me going, oh, because I don't know what's coming at me. I can't say yes or no to that until I answer it, right? And it might be important. Who knows? You won't find out till you answer it. So you've got to answer it. So what we've done is we've gotten rid of that. And it just says, if you want to get in touch with me, talk to Natalie, like get in touch with Natalie. Natalie will basically, she's my gatekeeper, right? So it's like, who are you? What do you want? When do you, that type of thing. So having an EA changed a lot for me because there's stuff I cannot do and I could do, but it would take 80% of my energy to do something I'm really bad at. Whereas that energy would be so much better spent on something I'm exceptionally good at, which comes naturally. So having a good support network, removing myself from being too easily available was a big thing. And refining my specialty. So being really specific about what I'm good at, like, and make that my thing, drill down into it. So if I was a generalist, that would be terrible for me because I would be semi-okay at lots of stuff, but there would be lots of stuff constantly going on that I'm trying to stay across, right? So when we started this business, it was a bespoke training and workshop company. We would create workshops specifically for a client. Dumb idea, because you're having to go out and explore all of this stuff and pull it together to give it to this person. Whereas by refining down what you do and specializing, I don't need to search anymore. I know if I am, it's very much in this little circle that my specialty is, and that works exceptionally well for me, because then I go on an ideas diet. I don't need to know all the other stuff that's going on, because it doesn't relate to my specialty, which relieves my brain and allows me to now just function in the area that I need to and that I'm good at, and that takes away a lot of the pressure and stress from me. So specialize is really good. I have my wife bought me a watch, and my watch has, because I'm terrible, I have alarms on here, but I have this little function which allows me to make it go silent. Which makes it useless. So my watch, which is connected to my phone, vibrates, and I cannot escape the vibration on my wrist. So if I'm doing client work, I need it to vibrate to tell me your time's up, it's time to go, because you've got other stuff to do. So having alarms in place, we have like 12 alarms on this phone. Probably more, and it tells me what to do at what times. And I now know when the alarm goes off, it's 7:30 or it's this time of the day. I know what time of the day it is based on the alarm. And some of the alarms have different noises. Some of them have songs, and the song will be for a specific thing because it has more of an emotional connection. So all of it is kind of like whatever your I'm going to call it weakness, right? As in, it's the area where you lack the most strength. And my weak areas are controlling that attention sometimes. So if that's the case, I identify it and go, what is the thing I need in place to make that non-existent? I don't have to deal with it. It just doesn't exist anymore. And those are all sort of helpful things, but there are many other things as well. But I think the biggest one was an ideas diet has been really helpful. Yeah, because for example, I've got a lot of people, my friends who are researchers or whatever, and they're like, "Hey, have you read the book on da da da?" I'm like, "Why would I want to?" "Oh, it's a really interesting book." It's like, I don't care. What's it got to do with me doing what I do? They're like, "Well, nothing." And it's like, good, keep it to yourself.
And it sounds like a diagnosis is almost a superpower, really, because when you know why you do what you do, you can empower the good aspects of it, rather than looking at the dysfunctional stuff or the more difficult behaviors or the things that other people see as difficult, and then seeing that as a problem. Instead, you can focus on the good stuff and minimize the things that are difficult. One of the reasons I invited you to talk to me about this was because I'd emailed you about our public speaking one. I received your email bounce back, and I went, that is so cool. You've set this professional boundary so that you can be your best. And then I know of so many other adults who went through an adult diagnosis, and some of them they're not telling people. It's just between you and me, and it's got the stigma, and whereas knowledge is power. And so if you know, I have ADHD, these are my strengths, these are areas that I need help with, let's do it. And it ends up becoming a really high performance situation, because I've noticed a lot of the ADHD people that I engage with, they are just magnificent at stuff that just is off the scale for me. Whereas I can be a generalist. I can do really well at a whole bunch of stuff, and I don't have to be exceptionally good at any of it. Whereas I've noticed the people that I work with ADHD really are very talented at the things that they're passionate about.
Because we like to dig down, right? We dig deep down into stuff. The email, out of office email, which is made, that, because thank you for reminding me of the email. That's kind of actually where we started, was with that.
Mm.
because email, laboring over exactly what words, because I'm the speaker coachy guy. It's like, it was just taking too much time, too much of my energy. Whereas I don't need to deal with that stuff. But I also have that now on my LinkedIn as well. So you can do an out of office for
Yes.
3 months on your LinkedIn. It's a little bit more abrupt on LinkedIn because you have less characters, but it basically
Yes.
just says, hey, great to hear from you. If you want to work with me, there are these 3 areas, and they're just links, which I want to push people back to my website, so that they go, oh, okay, cool. I see what you do. All the pre-work that I used to have to do to talk people through is now loaded into my website. Like, well, how much does it cost? It's on my website. Download the brochure. Well, what's involved in it? It's on my website. Download the brochure.
Yeah.
Which it just removes that need to be over explaining and also being pulled aside for something that could have been automated, right? So it's like, automate your life. The other part about, you just said people who are, keeping it to themselves. The other reason that out of office email works really well is my preference wouldn't be to work with people who were anti-ADHD.
Yeah.
In fact, if ADHD means that I'm more like I am, then I spent way too many years pretending to be something I wasn't. And I know
Yes.
that that is a soulless, lifeless existence where you're covering up a huge portion of yourself out of fear that someone else that you're trying to impress might find out and then sever ties with you. That is if you live in that place of fear, that's never going to end anywhere good, right? So by having that outward expression of your awesomeness that is your ADHD, whether that's through your creative expression, through your tattoos, or through your own personal stories, all you're doing is thinning out all of the people that you don't actually want to be working with, because they're not your tribe. You want to attract your tribe, find your tribe by just being you, like authentically you, whatever that means. But there's a lot of fear there. It took me 10 years before I would openly, especially as I was building my business. The last thing I want to do is tell people, oh, I used to be a heroin addict. It's like, yeah. And it took 10 years until I'm like, no, that is actually a part of my life. That was part of it. And there were lessons learnt within that make me who I am today. They don't make me less of who I am. They actually make me more of the whole who I am. But denying those parts of ourselves is denying parts of ourselves, and we cannot do that. So it's a tough call, but more people are doing it. And there is a massive support network out there for people who will warmly embrace you if you actually say, look, I've got ADHD. And the more people that are doing it, the more it's actually turning organizations to have to embrace that and go, hey, this is a thing, and we need to embrace this, and then think about what is the best way that people with ADHD, what is the best way that they work, and how can we accommodate that, you know um, yeah, because the more we can start utilizing that really excellent aspect of ADHD and minimizing the rubbish other part that people are, constrained by. Like, for example, you have to work an 8-hour day. Well, what if I can get all that shit done in 4 hours? Because I'm amazing. I have to sit here and pretend for fear of, that you're not doing enough. It's like, these are all things that will be challenged by people with ADHD. How they do things differently. But the more people that speak about it openly, the more normalized it becomes, and the more we can actually start to get the best out of ourselves and out of our time with our personal lives and our professional lives. Pushball time.
Gosh, oh my gosh, I want to give you a hug. That was amazing. And the last question, the last question I have, because I know that you've missed the start of your next meeting because sorry, you've ignored the alarm. My last question is, when you have someone near to you who is going through an adult diagnosis, what is the best thing you can be doing for them? How do you support somebody with this journey? Because it's obviously massive.
Okay, cool. So, and it is massive, and it's a big question. So, all I can give you is what I've experienced myself, and that is my wife, awesome wife. Um, she researched. She just
Hmm.
took an interest, took an interest in it and started reading. And there were tears, and there were talks, and there were all sorts of stuff. But
Hmm.
it's understanding that other person's experience,
Hmm.
and just the diagnosis for both of us explains a
Hmm.
lot, but for a partner of someone with ADHD, there will be frustration. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? It's like, and um, the frustration creates a frustration cycle. The ADHD
Yes.
person's frustrated. It frustrates the non-ADHD or the partner or the friend or family,
Mm.
and it just keeps looping, right? So I think it's just being able to learn a bit about ADHD and the behaviors. Estella listens to partners of people with ADHD. She listens to an audio of that, and it just helps, because what it is she's like, "You're not as bad as some of them. That's kind of cool." And then she's like, "There is some of the stuff they're talking about that's so you," and it opens up a conversation
Mm.
around behaviors. And for an adult, sometimes those behaviors can be embarrassing, to
Yes.
talk about. And if it was just kind of hit cold and hard, it would be probably a wall would come up that's been there for a
Mm.
lifetime.
Mm.
So by having that person having a deeper understanding and creating it as a conversation, not an attack on
Hmm.
personality and behavior, it probably is about behavior, but it's not you, it's your behavior. We need to separate
Yes.
those two things. By that person being able to do that, it means that the both parties will be open to discussion rather than closed. So that would be it. A bit of research, and there's so much research out there,
Mm.
and there is good research, and then there is other stuff. You need to thanks, Siri. You need to filter through the information, but be wary. There are still doctors out there that believe that ADHD does not exist, and it
Mm.
especially does not exist for women.
Hmm.
Yeah, so be real careful with that one. Um, I would say, I think what's been everything's been helpful with Estella, particularly her desire to know stuff, right?
Mhm.
So um, she will challenge the doctor, because the doctors are, um, it's a medical practice.
Mm.
They are generalists. They will
Mm.
know a bit about a lot, but when you get into ADHD and neurodiversity, they will
Mm.
know. If you do your research, you will know more than them, and you
Mm.
should know more than them. Yeah. We've often sat with the doctor, and they've just gone, "What? Hang on." And we're learning at the same time with them.
Mm.
And if you've got a doctor who's not willing to learn with you, then you need to either change doctors or go in there armed with the information that has your best interest in mind.
Mhm.
And yeah, that's it.
Mm. Cool. Well, is there anything you want to leave us with?
Um, yeah, sure. It's um, if you have kids who you think have ADHD or any kind of neurodiversity going on, um, get them checked out. They'll appreciate you for it later on in life. Definitely don't leave it as long. Like I say, my biggest thing was getting diagnosed was a blessing, but at the same time, it was like, why did I have to suffer for so long?
Mhm.
Um, I I am where I am now, right? Like I do what I do. Um, I've built my cognitive intelligence over time, but imagine what I could have done if I'd had 20 years head start as opposed to where I am now. And I think there's a happiness that I am where I am and that I'm alive, and there's a little bit of a sadness that that it could have been so much better. And for anyone, whether you're got kids or you're an adult yourself, go out and at least get it diagnosed, because an answer will change your life.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Yeah. So we'll leave it there, but that was just so moving. Thank you. I appreciate your just being so candid and so available, because it's important. The more we talk about this, the more that it's socially acceptable and socially supported, and there's frameworks in place to help people and make it, people can be their whole selves. So I feel so emotional. Thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Always a pleasure. And yeah, the more we talk about it, the more open it becomes. So yeah, you'll know when you're comfortable. Everyone has their own time, and you'll know. Everyone will know theirs.